Hello and welcome to Houdini Rigging Object Relationships. We're going to cover today what it sounds like, relationships between objects. Now what do I mean by that? By that I mean basically parent relationships, constraints, and whatnot. These are the fundamentals of rigging. Without these, we can't even create a rig. And by objects I mean anything from geometry to bones to muscles to nulls, whatever it might be. How we inherit transforms and manipulate transforms and those relationships between objects and their transforms. So let's jump right in. So let's control click and create a sphere and then jump back up to the object level, and automatically it's going to give us the control tool for the sphere. So let's move this off to the side and move it up a little bit. Now let's control click on the box so it also creates it at the origin. And then let's make sure to jump back up to the object level, out of the geometry level. So how do we parent two objects together? Very simply, we connect them in the network editor. Now something that's interesting about Houdini is that by default, a child will snap to its parent's origin. So if we parent the box onto the sphere, the box is going to snap to where the sphere is. That's a little bit hard to see, so let's grab this box and let's just scale it up just a little bit until it starts to peek out. There we go. Now you can see that we have a box that's actually inside the sphere. And when we move the sphere, the box is going to move along with it. But when we move the box, the sphere will be independent of it. So that's just basic parenting. Okay? And to unparent, we just break the connection. You'll notice that the box is now off the origin because we transformed it, right? Let's revert it back to its defaults so that it's the right size and the right location. And we'll just revert the sphere back to its defaults as well. Now what if we don't want that? What if we like exactly where our box is right now and we just want it to receive any future transforms of the sphere? If we select the box, you'll notice that we have this keep position when parenting. And this is important in that most networks in Houdini, when we create connections, right, it's procedural, the information will flow down and everything will be great. And it's kind of not based on any other factors. This is kind of different in that how parent relationships work are based on the state of this toggle when we're actually doing the parenting at that moment. So if we say keep position when parenting and we parent these two, now the box hasn't moved, but it is still parented under the sphere. And also the box's transforms are zeroed out by default, which is also really helpful, right? So I can move this around, and then if I want it to go back to where its original position was, I can say revert to defaults, and it goes right back there. Keep in mind now that when we have this keep position when parenting on, if I unparent it, he's going to stay right where he was. So this keep position when parenting toggle is important both when parenting and unparenting. Now you'll notice that his transforms are still zeroed out. This is because of what's called a pre-transform. Now a lot of other packages may or may not call it this, and they may or may not even let you know that this is going on. In Maya it's called freeze transforms. But if we middle mouse click on this sphere, we'll see that it says no pre-transform. On the box, if we middle mouse click it, we'll see that it actually has translate, rotate, and scale values. What the pre-transform is that basically it will do this transformation first, and then it will zero out all these transforms. So this is what the pre-transform is, what the object does before we do anything else on top of it. And we actually see this drop-down box for pre-transform. And this gives us all the options that we need for that. So if we want to actually bring back those values, we can go to pre-transform and say extract pre-transform. And now we see that we have all those values as they were before. And so if we zero out these values, it's actually back at the origin. Now, if we want to put them somewhere else, we can just say, click on pre-transform and say clean transform. And that will clean our translates, rotates, and scales. And then we can clean out individual ones as well if we want to. We'll also notice, again, what does it have to do with parenting? Again, if we want to, we can parent this box under here, and its pre-transform will be automatically set for us. And this is as of Houdini 12.1. I believe in previous versions it would actually put the transform values in here. But in Houdini 12.1 it kind of does it automatically and silently when you have keep position when parenting. Okay, so this is critical for these sorts of situations where we want to keep things where they were before. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. There is one other way that we can do parenting. It's a little bit different, and it's based on subnetworks, and we'll cover that a bit later. We're going to cover a few other things first before we jump into that. So let's extract the pre-transform from this and place our object back at the origin. So in other packages, you'll hear of something called constraints, where what if we want to have multiple parents that have a varying influence on our object? In Houdini, we don't usually call them constraints, but the same concept exists. And this is all done with what's called the blend object. So let's place another object in the scene. Let's make it a null. And let's place our null over here. So now we have sphere and a null. Let's scale up the size of our null so we can see them a bit better. And let's make our null, let's see. There we go. A little bit easier to see now. So we have our null and we have our sphere. So as it stands right now, we know how to parent under one object or another. But what if we want to have varying influence from both? Well, we can use the blend node. And the blend node has a few different options. Now as we plug in these objects, you'll see that we actually have multiple toggles here. And we can blend between these two as much as we want. So the weight 1 has to do with our first object, which is our sphere object, and the weight 2 has to do with our second object, which is our null. So for just two objects, having two sliders is kind of overkill. We can also do it as a sequence, where it will simply blend between however many inputs we have. If it's 1 or if it's 100, we can just go through that sequence of inputs. But if we want to vary the amount that they're affected by it, we can do this. We can also choose only certain ones. So let's say for our first one, I just want it to have the rotates of our sphere, but I want it to have the translates and scales of our null. So now I can move our null around and then go to our sphere, and our sphere controls the rotates of our box object, but the null controls the translates and the scales. So we can have multiple objects driving different parts of the transform of our object. The rotation blending just has to do with efficiency. The fastest is Euler. The default is fast linear. And then, well, shortest path, fast linear, and then linear as well. Generally speaking, you won't notice too much difference between these, so it's just best to go with the fast linear. Constrain is a little bit different, where essentially it snaps between the two. So it's a lot like sequence, only instead of blending smoothly, it just snaps between one and another. So this can be useful for certain types of rig controls that you don't want to blend smoothly. You just want them to jump between one or the next one. Again, and sequence has a few other things like ignoring the scales or what type of rotation blending you want to do between the two of them. So there's many different options here in how we want to use this blend object. So for a lot of different types of constraints, the blend object is going to work perfectly for exactly what we need.